The rich aroma of white truffle oil and ridiculously expensive lilies filled the air of La Aurora. A restaurant where the napkins felt like silk and the silence cost more than my first car. I remained completely still with my hands folded over the white linen tablecloth. Across from me, my father Don Javier Castillo and my mother Lucia Castillo watched me with cold clinical indifference. To my right, my sister Valeria Castillo held her iPhone firmly, the camera perfectly angled to capture the exact moment my face would crumble. They did not start with appetizers. They started with the envelope. Don Javier slid a thick cream-colored sheet of paper toward me. The ink was dark, the header official. It was a formal notification of disinheritance and family severance. Not only were they removing me from the will, they were erasing me completely from the history of their lives. "Read it, Elena," said Don Javier. His voice sounded like dry parchment brushing against another piece of parchment. "We wanted this to be a formal occasion. Clarity prevents future litigation." I lowered my gaze to the words. Ineptitude, lack of alignment with family values, inability to contribute to the prestige of the surname. It was a carefully crafted list of my supposed sins. Most of them related to my refusal to lie for Valeria during her third academic crisis at university and my decision to pursue forensic accounting instead of managing the superficial family gallery. Valeria shifted slightly in her seat as a predatory smile formed at the corners of her mouth. "Do you want me to post the reaction video now or wait until you start crying?" Valeria asked. She did not even look at me. She was looking at the screen, checking the lighting. My followers love stories about toxic families. This is going to go viral. Lucia sighed theatrically, letting out a sound heavy with exaggerated disappointment. She adjusted her pearl necklace as the gems clicked softly against each other. "We tried to guide you, darling," whispered Lucia. "But you have always been so rigid, so lacking in the grace that defines this family. It is simply a matter of compatibility. You do not fit the image we want to project." I did not cry. I did not gasp. I felt a strange vibration humming inside my chest. A frequency of absolute clarity that had been growing slowly for 3 years. I looked at the letter again. It was a masterpiece of arrogance. They believed they held all the cards because they owned the house deeds, the accounts in the Cayman Islands, and the social prestige of the city. "Is that all?" I asked. My voice came out flat, without the tremor they so desperately wanted to hear. Don Javier leaned back in his chair, puffing out his chest with satisfaction. "That is correct. Your personal belongings have already been packed and moved to a warehouse in the industrial zone. The key is inside the envelope. We have also revoked your access to the family accounts. To all intents and purposes, you are a stranger to us." Valeria let out a giggle as she zoomed in on my eyes. "Look at her," she whispered toward her phone. "She is completely in shock. She really thought she was part of the plan." I let the silence stretch. I watched a waiter pass elegantly with a bottle of aged wine, its gold label shining under the chandeliers. I thought about the nights I spent in the basement of the family office auditing accounts that did not add up. I thought about the consulting fees Don Javier paid to shell companies to hide the lack of liquidity in his empire. I thought about how they had used me as the invisible scaffolding that held up their glittering lifestyle, convinced that I was too loyal or too afraid to notice the rot. "I also have something for you," I said. I reached into my leather bag and pulled out a matte black envelope. It was not cream-colored or elegant. It looked like a court summons. I slid it across the table. It stopped exactly where the disinheritance letter had begun. Don Javier frowned. He did not open it immediately. He studied me carefully, looking for some trick or perhaps a plea for forgiveness. "What is this? A handwritten apology? A request for money?" He sneered. "Open it, father," I replied. He broke the seal with a sharp motion. Lucia leaned toward him, unable to hide her curiosity. Valeria continued recording with her phone, sensing a dramatic twist that would likely boost engagement metrics. As Don Javier read, the color began to drain from his face. It did not happen suddenly. It was a slow draining of blood that left him with a grayish, waxy pallor. His hand began to tremble and the paper vibrated on the table. This is a mistake," he stammered. "This document is a notice of foreclosure and property transfer," I replied, along with a certified copy of the debt acquisition agreement. Lucia snatched the papers from his hands. Her eyes scanned the pages as her breathing became shallow. "What are you talking about? The property is insured. The gallery is our legacy." "The gallery is a bottomless pit, mother," I said, "and the property was mortgaged to the hilt to keep it afloat. You did not notice how the interest rates on the private loans kept rising because I was the one handling the payments. Or rather, pretending to handle them while quietly buying the debt from the creditors. Valeria slowly lowered her phone and her expression shifted from mockery to confusion. Wait, what does that mean? She asked. It means, I said, leaning forward, that I am no longer your daughter. Now I am your landlord. And since 4 o'clock this afternoon, the main residence, the gallery, and the city penthouse have been transferred to my holding company. The silence that followed was different from the first. It was no longer the silence of superiority. It was the silence of absolute emptiness. Don Javier slammed his palm on the table, making the cutlery jump. You stole from us. You used the family's resources to destroy us. I did not steal a single cent. I replied. I used my own salary. The one you forgot to pay me for 18 months. And a rather aggressive loan from a firm specializing in distressed assets. I did not destroy you, Father. I simply let you destroy yourselves. For years you treated me like a tool. You forgot that tools can also be used to dismantle things. Lucia looked like she was about to faint. She clutched the tablecloth with white knuckles. Elena, please, we are your parents. You cannot do this. Think of the scandal. Think of the family name. The family name is a brand, I replied, and I just bought the rights. Valeria reacted immediately, raising her phone again, though her voice no longer held the same confidence. Guys, look at this. What a plot twist. My sister just tried to scam us. Can you believe her audacity? Tell them, Elena, tell them you were doing this because you were jealous of my influence. I looked directly at the camera. I did not smile. Actually, Valeria, maybe you should check your bank account. The allowance account you use for skincare and trips was a subsidiary of the main property account. As I now own the assets and hold majority control of the trust. I closed that account 10 minutes before we sat down to dinner. Valeria froze. She began frantically tapping her phone screen. Her face collapsed, but not in the calculated sadness she used for her videos. It was real, ugly panic. You cannot do that. I have a trip to Bali next week. My deposits are there. I am sure you will find a way to monetize the experience of being poor. I said. Don Javier stood up abruptly, making the chair scrape against the marble floor. Under the dim light he looked monstrous, his face twisted with rage and disbelief. I am going to sue you until I destroy you. I will find any legal loophole. Will you return those properties or will I make sure you never work in this city again? I rose slowly, smoothing the wrinkles in my dress. I felt light, as if 1,000 kilos of expectations and silent resentments had evaporated, leaving me free. Go ahead, I said. Hire the best lawyers money can buy. Oh wait, you do not have money. Your accounts are frozen while the property transfer is completed. Your financial history is a desert full of abusive interest loans and broken promises. I have been auditing your failures for 3 years. Father, I know where every cent is buried and I have already dug it up. I took the disinheritance letter they had given me, folded it carefully, and placed it back in front of Don Javier. I accept your conditions, I told him. I am officially out of the family and I have never been happier to be a stranger to you. Then I turned to the waiter, who was watching the entire scene with fascination and wide eyes. The check, please, I said, and charge it to the house account. I own the house now. As I walked toward the exit, I heard Lucia begin to cry, a sharp and weak sound echoing under the vaulted ceiling. I heard Don Javier shouting with a breaking voice as he tried to reclaim power that no longer existed. I heard Valeria screaming into her phone, probably trying to delete the video or manipulate the narrative in real time. I stepped out into the cool night air. The city lights hummed softly and the metropolis traffic pulsed around me like a giant heart. For the first time in 26 years I did not feel the need to check my phone for an urgent message or an email full of demands. I walked 3 blocks to a small unremarkable cafe where my friend and legal advisor, Marcus, was waiting. He was a man who wore mismatched socks and read poetry in the margins of corporate legal documents. He looked up when I entered and smiled with understanding. Did everything go according to plan? Marcus asked. I sat down and ordered a black coffee. I did not want anything sophisticated. I did not want anything that tasted of truffle oil and lies. Better, I replied. In fact, they handed me the family's separation letter first. They saved me the trouble of explaining why I was evicting them. Marcus let out a genuine laugh that filled the small place. And the bankrupt trending sister? He asked. The following weeks were an avalanche of paperwork. It was not a cinematic montage of victory. It was exhausting. There were court hearings, contested documents, and a series of unpleasant meetings with creditors who were more than happy to see Don Javier's empire fall. as long as they recovered their money. My parents tried to contact me. First came the anger, emails full of capital letters and threats about family betrayal. Then came the negotiation. Lucia sent me a bouquet of lilies and a letter reminding me of the time I had a fever as a child and how she stayed up all night holding my hand. It was a calculated move, a desperate attempt to use nostalgia as a weapon. I did not respond. I did not hate them. Hate requires an emotional investment I was no longer willing to make. What I felt was a deep indifference. They had spent my entire life teaching me that love was a transaction. That value was measured in prestige. And that loyalty was something demanded from others without offering anything in return. They had succeeded with that lesson. I simply applied their logic to the financial balance sheet. I sold the gallery. I did not keep it as a trophy. I sold it to a local art collective that wanted to offer free studios for young people from low-income backgrounds. I kept the main property, not to live in it, but to convert it into a series of affordable apartments. The process of dismantling their legacy felt like a spiritual cleansing. Every time I signed a document that removed another layer of their vanity, I felt a part of the old Elena disappear, that passive and silent Elena. 6 months later I ran into Valeria in a supermarket. She was carrying a fake designer bag and looked exhausted. The glow that the ring light used to give her skin for video recording had disappeared, replaced by the sickly pallor of someone who had finally discovered that influence does not pay the rent. She stopped in the fruits and vegetables aisle, looking at me with a mixture of resentment and nostalgia. "I am going through a tough time, Elena," she whispered. "Mom is depressed. Dad lives in a 2-bedroom rented apartment in a part of the city he used to call a dump. We have nothing." I observed her truly. I saw the girl who had stepped on my fingers her entire childhood to look better in the mirror. "You have the truth, Valeria," I said. "That is more than you ever had when you were rich." "That does not pay my car lease," she replied bitterly, letting out the old resentment again. "You did this to us. You ruined our lives." "No," I answered. "You lived your lives. I just stopped paying for the illusion." I walked away, leaving her among the organic kale and absurdly expensive berries. That night I sat in my own modest apartment with large windows and a view of the river. It was not a palace and it had no staff, but every corner belonged to me. There were no ghosts of expectations haunting the hallways. No hidden accounting books. I picked up a book and started reading while the silence of the room felt like a warm blanket. I thought about the luxury restaurant and the cream-colored envelope. I thought about the expression on Don Javier's face when he realized that the inept daughter had been the only person at the entire table who really knew how to count. I had spent my whole life trying to earn a place at their table only to discover that that table was built on sand. I did not need their invitation. I did not need their approval. I reached out and turned off the lamp, letting the moonlight fill the room. I closed my eyes and breathed in the aroma of my own independence. It smelled of rain, old books, and the calm, steady rhythm of a heart that finally belonged to itself. I was no longer a daughter, a sister, or a disappointment. I was simply Elena, and for the first time in my life, that was more than enough. Thank you for listening to today's story. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to support the channel. See you in the next story.